Hey everyone, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Imagine surrendering. You're under a flag of truce, you think safety is finally at hand,
Yeah,
only to be met with just, well, a brutal, merciless slaughter.
it's hard to even picture.
That betrayal, that kind of unpunished violence, it really lies at the heart of the historical account we're delving into today.
Mhm.
This deep dive explores a really pivotal period in American history, the tumultuous Reconstruction era.
It was such a complex time.
Yeah, full of political intrigue, the struggle for civil rights, and fierce contests over how the law itself was applied.
Absolutely.
So if you're ready to unpack this critical and frankly often overlooked chapter, definitely hit that like button and subscribe for more explorations into the stories that shaped us.
And today we're digging into Unpunished Murder by Goldstone Lawrence. We've put a link in the description below if you want to check it out.
Great recommendation.
Yeah, it's a vital work. And this book isn't just, a dry list of dates and facts.
Right.
It's really an unflinching investigation into the raw exercise of power, the fragility of newly won rights.
Especially then.
Exactly. And the enduring consequences when justice is denied, particularly in that long pursuit of equality.
So we'll be focusing specifically on the Colfax Massacre and its aftermath, right?
That's the plan. We'll draw on Lawrence's detailed research to understand this pivotal moment. And the cast of characters is, well, diverse presidents, Supreme Court justices, but also just ordinary people fighting for their place.
Okay, let's set the scene then. Grant Parish, Louisiana.
Right.
Now, this wasn't some old, established place. It was actually created pretty recently, back in 1869.
By the Republican-controlled state legislature, which is key.
Explain that significance. Why was that key?
Well, the intent seems pretty clear. It was a deliberate effort to carve out a space where newly freedmen could actually exercise political power.
Huh. And they even named it after President Grant and Vice President Colfax.
Yeah, nailing their colors to the mast, so to speak.
And what's really striking is the contrast, isn't it? Between Grant Parish and the surrounding parishes like Wynne and Rapides.
Oh, absolutely. Those were predominantly white, much more aligned with the old order. Grant Parish was sort of an island.
And a significant chunk of it was land formerly owned by Willie Calhoun. Tell us about him.
He's a fascinating figure, a southern white man, which was rare in this context, who genuinely seemed to believe in equal rights.
Really?
Yeah, he actively championed creating this new parish. He was definitely an outlier for his time and place. His actions must have really stood out.
I bet. And within Colfax, the main town, there was an armed black militia.
That's right, armed with Enfield rifles, trying to protect the new Republican leadership there.
So it paints a picture of a community actively trying to, well, defend the foothold they'd gained.
Definitely. Building a foundation for their rights, but doing so against some serious and growing opposition.
Which connects to the bigger picture that contested 1872 governor's election in Louisiana.
Exactly. Kellogg, the Republican, versus McHenry, who led a fusionist ticket.
Fusionist, so like a coalition.
Yeah, basically a mix of Democrats and anti-Grant Republicans, anyone opposed to the Reconstruction government. It created this incredibly fractured political environment.
And that played out locally in Grant Parish.
Directly.
Yeah.
You ended up with two sets of local officials claiming legitimacy. The Republicans held the courthouse, the official seat of power.
Okay.
But the fusionists organized their own shadow government, essentially challenging them at every turn.
Wow, so competing authorities right there. And the white opposition, people like Hadnot and Nash, their response wasn't just political debate, was it?
Not at all. Lawrence details how they were actively using intimidation, direct threats, trying to undermine the Republican officials.
And this is where groups like the Klan come in.
Yes, the Klan and the Knights of the White Camellia were very active, especially in neighboring Rapides parishes, terrorizing black voters, trying to stop them from participating at all.
Just creating this pervasive atmosphere of fear.
It wasn't just disagreement. It was a deliberate campaign of violence, trying to dismantle the progress made during Reconstruction.
And then there's Dallas White, the Unionist sheriff.
Right. He was appointed because the previous sheriff, Shelby, had actually sided with the opposition.
So White was trying to protect the freedmen?
He was. He was committed to it. And tragically, that commitment cost him his life. He was murdered by C.C. Nash.
The same Nash leading the opposition.
The very same. White's murder was a huge escalation. Really showed how dangerous things were getting for anyone standing up for black rights.
And that happened right before.
Right before. Hadnot and Nash attempted their coup, as Lawrence describes it, trying to physically seize the courthouse just before Easter Sunday, 1873.
making a direct, forceful move.
No question about it. They wanted control.
Which brings us to that horrific day, Easter Sunday, April 13th, 1873, the Colfax Massacre.
A heavily armed white mob, led by C.C. Nash, descended on the courthouse.
And the difference in firepower was just stark.
Completely overwhelming. The attackers didn't just have rifles, they brought a cannon.
Like a cannon.
Yeah. The black men defending the courthouse, mostly the militia we mentioned, they were just outgunned.
So eventually they surrendered.
They did, under a white flag,
Yeah.
believing they'd been promised safety.
But that promise, it was a lie.
A complete, devastating lie. Once they surrendered and gave up their weapons,
Oh, no.
they were executed, just
Yeah.
shot down in cold blood.
How many?
The accounts, including reports in the New York Times that eventually came out, are just harrowing. Over 100 black men,
Over 100.
brutally shot after they had surrendered. Some were trapped inside the courthouse when it was set on fire, burned alive. And the killing didn't stop there. The mob hunted down others who tried to flee into the woods. Just went on through the night.
It's almost impossible to comprehend that level of brutality.
And because Colfax was so remote,
Right, you mentioned that.
it took days for army units or reporters to even get there. Imagine what they found. The Times called the details positively appalling in their atrocity.
And didn't one of the mob leaders, Hadnot, get killed?
Ironically, yes. James Hadnot was likely killed by friendly fire in the chaos. Just underscores the sheer frenzy and lack of control.
That there were survivors, people who saw what happened.
Yes, crucially. Levi Nelson's testimony is incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
He survived being shot after the surrender.
He testified in court.
He did. He witnessed the whole thing, the surrender, the killings, and he identified the men responsible.
That must have taken immense courage.
Unbelievable courage. And there were other accounts, like from Clement Penn's partner, who witnessed his execution,
Just heartbreaking.
and the physical evidence, the discovery of the remains. Dozens of black men, some burned so badly they couldn't be recognized, in and around that courthouse. It paints a truly gruesome picture.
So after this massacre, who tries to bring these people to justice?
That enormous task fell to J.R. Beckwith, the U.S. Attorney.
An almost impossible job, you'd think.
Absolutely. Trying to prosecute these men in a climate just steeped in white supremacy, where witness intimidation was basically guaranteed.
How did he even get witnesses?
It was incredibly difficult. People were terrified, and for good reason. The first trial really relied heavily on Levi Nelson's testimony.
The survivor.
Yes, he recounted everything and identified the defendants. But even then,
What happened?
it ended in a mistrial. The jury was divided. Tells you a lot about the biases of the time, doesn't it?
Yeah, clearly. But Beckwith didn't give up.
No, incredibly. He pushed for a retrial. He even tried to get a more representative jury pool, which was a battle in itself.
But then a Supreme Court justice got involved.
Yes, Joseph P. Bradley.
Hmm.
And his intervention was, let's say, unexpected and ultimately devastating for the prosecution.
How so?
Mid-trial, the second trial, Bradley allowed the defense to suddenly argue that the federal government had no jurisdiction, that this wasn't a federal case.
Wait, mid-trial.
Yes. It completely disrupted things. And Bradley, well, he had strong states' rights beliefs. He wasn't a fan of Reconstruction measures.
So he was predisposed against federal intervention?
It certainly seems that way. He even thought former slaveholders should be compensated. So his allowing this jurisdictional challenge wasn't entirely surprising, perhaps.
So what happened in the second trial? Did they get convictions?
They actually did. Guilty verdicts for Cruikshank and two others.
So some measure of justice.
You'd think so. But then Justice Bradley himself overturned the convictions.
He overturned them. On what grounds?
His reasoning was very narrow. He argued the federal government couldn't prosecute because the victims' rights weren't violated solely because of their race.
What does that even mean? They were targeted because they were black men trying to hold political office?
Exactly. But Bradley used this incredibly restrictive interpretation of the 14th and 15th Amendments, basically saying private individuals attacking other private individuals, even racially motivated, wasn't the federal government's problem unless the state itself was involved or the motive was only race, nothing else, like politics.
That sounds like a legal loophole to deny justice.
It effectively acted as one, and it was a huge blow. Then came the full Supreme Court decision in United States v. Cruikshank, led by Chief Justice Waite.
What did that do?
It cemented Bradley's view and went even further. It essentially bettered the Enforcement Acts of 1870.
Those were the laws meant to protect civil rights.
Yes, meant to give the federal government teeth to prosecute Klan violence and protect black voting rights. Cruikshank severely limited federal power to protect citizens from violations by other individuals. It basically said protecting citizens from each other was the state's job, not the federal government's.
Even if the state was unwilling or unable to do it.
Precisely, which was often the case in the South.
So these Supreme Court decisions, they just pulled the rug out from under federal protection for African Americans.
In many ways, yes. They dismantled a key part of the legal framework of Reconstruction. It sent a clear signal that the federal government was backing away from protecting black citizens in the South.
How must the white community there have reacted first to Beckwith trying to prosecute and then to these rulings?
Probably with initial outrage at Beckwith's efforts, followed by, I imagine, relief and a sense of vindication when the convictions were overturned and Cruikshank came down. It essentially validated their resistance.
And this all fits into the broader context, doesn't it? The shift in the political climate.
Definitely. Support for Reconstruction was fading up north. People were getting tired of the cost and the conflict.
And in the South, the Redeemer movement was gaining steam.
Right. Democrats aiming to restore white supremacy and redeem the South from Republican rule. Violence and intimidation were key tools.
Then came the 1876 election,
Highly contested, messy, leading to the Compromise of 1877.
which effectively ended Reconstruction.
That's the general consensus. Federal troops were withdrawn from the South in exchange for Hayes getting the presidency. It basically left Southern Republicans and African Americans to fend for themselves.
And C.C. Nash, the leader of the massacre.
Faced no real consequences. Remained a powerful figure in Grant Parish. It's a stark reminder of where the power truly lay.
It's also important, isn't it, to push back against that old narrative that Reconstruction was just a total failure, doomed from the start.
Absolutely. That narrative was often pushed by those who wanted it to fail. There were genuine efforts, real progress made towards equality, even if it was ultimately rolled back by violence and, well, decisions like Cruikshank.
And that monument in Colfax, erected decades later in 1922.
Yeah, presenting a completely biased pro-white mob version of events, calling it a riot where black people died, not a massacre. It just shows how contested this memory still is.
So how do we grapple with this, with moments where justice was so clearly denied?
That's the crucial question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think understanding events like Colfax and the legal decisions that followed forces us to see how fragile justice can be and how the fight for equal rights is an ongoing process. It wasn't settled then, and it requires constant vigilance.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Colfax Massacre. Really powerful and disturbing history.
Important history to confront.
Definitely. What stands out to you most from this? We'd love to hear your thoughts on the unpunished violence and its impact. Let us know in the comments below.
Yeah, please share your thoughts.
And if this deep dive sparked your curiosity or maybe anger or just a desire to know more, please share it with others. Let's keep these vital conversations about our past going.
Agreed.
Because the story of Colfax really is a stark reminder, isn't it? How fragile justice can be, how the struggle for equality needs that constant vigilance you mentioned. Maybe consider how the echoes of this unpunished murder, this denial of rights, might resonate even today in our ongoing pursuit of a more just society. Something to think about.